Every corporate machine is built on predictability. The gears turn smoothly as long as every piece feeding into the system is shaped exactly the same way. When a piece with a different shape enters the line, the machine grinds to a halt. When that friction happens, management usually turns to one specific question: how do we support neurodivergent employees? That question assumes the system itself is functioning perfectly. It places the entire burden of adaptation and the blame for the friction on the individual who didn't fit the mold. Dr. Shungu Magadza provides a necessary reframe. The focus must move from individual struggle to the organizational response. The question becomes, at what stage are we responding to neurodivergence as a system? Neurodivergent employees do not struggle in the workplace. Workplaces built for a single cognitive style struggle to process neurodiversity. Treating neurodivergence as an individual accommodation problem guarantees failure. It ignores the rigid environment demanding conformity in the first place. When a uniquely shaped talent enters a conventional system designed for one standard way of working, the immediate response is compression. The system forces the individual into a standardized slot. In this state, the organization interprets cognitive difference as a disruption to its standard workflow. Dr. Magadza's 6 Stages Framework, or SSF, acts as a diagnostic tool to map exactly how an organization responds to that perceived disruption. The framework measures organizational maturity across 6 distinct levels based on how leadership and internal systems react to cognitive difference. Traditional HR focuses on occasional exceptions. The SSF identifies the emotional drivers behind those rules and forces a redesign of the operational grid. Until an organization identifies exactly where it sits on this continuum, its diversity policies remain superficial paperwork that will neither protect nor utilize neurodivergent talent. This spectrum graph illustrates the complete framework. On the far left is the threat axis, covering stages -2 to 0. In these compliance-focused environments, managers mask frustration behind standards, citing communication issues or struggles with deadlines. These critiques are misinterpretations of a different cognitive style, rather than actual performance failures. If we look beneath those surface-level complaints, we find defensive emotional drivers. Managers are reacting to a fear of losing control and a deep discomfort with unpredictability. When leaders lack the confidence to manage diverse working styles, they default to strict control and a heavy push for conformity. This creates severe hidden friction. The entire burden is placed on the employee to heavily mask their traits just to survive the workday. The threat axis treats neurodivergence as a behavioral problem to be minimized. Consequently, it drives exceptional talent out the door. Moving up the continuum brings us to stages +1 to +3, the awareness phase. Organizations often believe they've achieved inclusion here, making accommodations for neurodivergent employees. But these adjustments are treated as fragile, special exceptions to the standard rule. The critical vulnerability of the awareness trap is that inclusion depends entirely on the personal empathy of individual managers. If that empathetic manager leaves or a team restructures, those temporary adjustments snap. The support system collapses instantly. True psychological safety cannot exist here. The employee's security is conditional, making it a policy of tolerance rather than a reliable architecture of inclusion. It is also crucial to note that systemic friction is not distributed evenly. Neurodivergent employees are not a monolith. The resistance an employee faces multiplies based on overlapping identities, such as race, gender, or migrant status. The system routes them through entirely different layers of friction. A system's leniency for an autistic Black employee will often look drastically different than its leniency for a white female employee with ADHD. Unconscious bias alters exactly how the policy is applied. Because organizations fail to respond to multidimensional difference equally, blanket HR policies fall short. Real inclusion requires a comprehensive audit of the entire operational system. The goal is to reach the far right of the framework, stages +4 to +6, known as the transformative axis. Reaching these stages requires deliberately overriding the organization's hidden fears by activating 3 specific growth drivers. The first driver is curiosity. Management must stop demanding conformity and start asking how an individual actually thinks and works best. The second is courage. Leadership must abandon the safety of one way of working and actively model vulnerability. The third is accountability. The organization must take responsibility for actively identifying and dismantling its own systemic barriers. This creates a new operational standard. Difference is a core strength used to shape the environment. Reaching the transformative axis requires integrating flexibility into the organization's core operational logic and leadership habits. In daily practice, a Stage +6 organization operates very differently, and it starts with communication. This chart compares a standard environment to a transformative one. Inclusive systems prioritize explicit written norms over unwritten rules, heavily reducing the reliance on assumption. Structurally, this means implementing flexible deadlines and autonomous work environments. Accommodations are built in by default, rather than requiring an employee to request them. Culturally, employee evaluations shift to strength-based conversations. The focus moves entirely away from judging an employee based on their ability to mask. These strategies build an environment of embedded psychological safety, where disclosing neurodivergence carries zero professional risk. Looking at the complete map of the SSF reveals the true organizational journey, moving from the compliance and fear of the threat axis, through the fragile awareness trap, and finally achieving the intentional design of the transformative axis. Instead of forcing neurodivergent employees to fit existing systems, organizations must redesign those systems to work for people. Adding policies for neurodivergent employees will always fail if the underlying emotional drivers of leadership remain hostile to difference, which leaves a stark question for organizational leaders to answer. Are your systems designed for difference, or just tolerating it? Genuine inclusion demands evolving exactly how an entire organization thinks, feels, and leads in the presence of difference. Advancing through the 6 stages framework functions as a high-level upgrade to organizational intelligence and capability.